Hello guys, what we are going to do now is to learn how to create a service bus queue. Okay, and the purpose of the service bus queue is to make sure that we have temporary storage room where we can actually store our messages in terms of peaks in demand. So let's say you have an application which is going to require millions of transactions to be made, and you want to make sure that each of these transactions is being attended to by your backend service. And the only way you can be sure is to make sure that you add each of the incoming transactions into a queue. With that said, what I'm going to do is to click on the create a resource, as we can see right here. So we click that and we need to look for the service bus. So right here, I'll search for that in the marketplace so we can see something is coming up. So now we can see that we have a service bus and Azure service bus solution for Sentinel. So I need this service bus. I'm going to click on that. And right here we can see that we have the service bus and we have the use service bus too. So these are the things that you can use the service bus for. And a service bus is like a namespace that has a queue and topics. So the queue basically is used to make sure that you have a temporary storage for the messages that are coming and which your handler who is serving as a backend want to process. And you want to make sure that each of the messages is being processed. You don't want to have any messages get lost. And the best thing you have to do is to make sure that at least you have these messages added into a queue so that it can be processed one after the other. And so the topic of the service bus is used to make sure that we can dispute messages to more than one subscribers. Okay. And here we can see that we have the premier tier and we have the standard tier. So we are going to be using the standard one, and the premium is basically if you are working on the production environment, then of course you have to use that. So I'm going to click on the create right now. As we can see, so the create is loading, so something is creating, and now I have under the basics tab I have the subscription, so I'll keep the subscription to be that, and I'm going to select my resource group, and that is selected. And right here I want to have a unique name for my service bus, and I'm going to call it queue topic. All right, so the location is going to be as default and the pricing tier is going to be standard. And now the next thing is to review and create. So here we can see that we are validating, and if everything is done correctly, then we should be able to have create. So let's click on the create. So we are creating right there, and we're submitting deployments as we can see. And if the deployment is done correctly, then what we are going to do is to go to the resource that we just created. So we can see that the deployment is still in progress, and this of course might take some time. So what I'm going to do is to pause and continue once we done deploying. All right, so we can see that the deployment is completed. And what I want to do now is to go to the resource that we just create, and that will be the queue topic. And under that queue topic, we should be able to see the queue and the topic. So now here we can see the resource, and here we can see the resource group and everything that we have created right there. And this is the host name, which is the queue topic that we actually use as the name, and the servicebus.windows.net is the domain. And now what I want to do is to look for the entities, and right here under the entity section you can see that I have the queues and the topics. So as I already discussed, the queues is one-to-one, so you want to send a message from the sender to a receiver, and the topic is one-to-many, so you want to send a message to many receivers. And what I'm going to do now is to click on the queue. Okay. So now we have the queue, and under the queue, I want to go to this tab that we can see right here. Then I'm going to click on that, and here we can see that we have this section where we can create the queue actually. What I want to do now is to call this uh, sales, let's call it sales messages. Okay, so this is going to be the sales messages, and this is going to be the messages which my sales department should receive. Okay, and this is what I mean by the sales messages, and this is the queue name, so which means that all the messages in this queue should go to the sales department, for instance. And now what I'm going to do next is to scroll down, so I will leave these to be as default. Okay, and I will hit create right here. Okay, so here we can see that the queue is creating, and once that is done, then we should have it here. So as you can see, we have the queue name to be sales messages, and it is active at the moment. And enable partitioning, we can see that for now that is actually false, but as a matter of fact that should be we should make that to be true. So what I'm going to do now is to go back a little bit, and let's see if we all right, so now we are here, and what I'm going to do is to basically delete the sales messages queue which I just created. And of course I would like to do that one more time because I forgot that steps. I have to tick the checkbox in order to make that to be true. So now again I will say sales messages. So, and I'll look for the enable partitioning. So as you can see right here, I'll tick that. So that is actually important, and I'll click on the create. So now that we actually have this, here we can see that that is true at the moment, and it is active, which is fine. All right. So the next thing I would like to do is to basically continue using these sales messages. And if you want to create for topics, which is going to be one to many, also you can go ahead and do the same thing here. And of course we can do for topic, but this section basically is meant for the queues, but I'm going to show you how to just create for topic as well quickly. So in order to create for topic, you click on the topics and you come to the topic right here. Okay, and now what we want to do is to make sure that we also create the topic name. So you want to decide on what is going to be the topic name. So here, let's say we want to have a situation whereby uh, we want to be able to publish the sales performance of our applications and to all the instances of our application. Let's say your application is hosted in Europe and another one is hosted in Asia or maybe in Africa. So you want to have the entire total sales for your organization being published into these applications. So each of these applications should be able to have the entire sales. So this is one of the usage of the public. So that is one to many. So we can have Asian here. So which means that for each of the application that we have in Asian, they will receive their own message. And you can create another one for United States and so on. But as I mentioned, this particular section is meant for the queue. So let's focus on the queue for now. So now here we have our queues uh, already created. So the next thing we have to do is to write code to send and receive message by using the queue. Okay, so here we can see that we already have the queue. So now we have to write a code which is going to send message to the queue, and then another code which is going to receive the message from the queue and disperse the message. So that would be the next thing we have to do. And why do we have to even do this kind of thing? So consider, for example, Maxibyte application. Let's say the customer can place an order through the Maxibyte website or mobile app. Because websites and mobile apps run on customer devices, there's really no limit to how many orders can be made at the same time. By having the mobile app and website deposit the orders in a service bus queue, then the backend component, which is a web app, is able to process orders from the queue at its own pace. And this is the purpose of using the uh, Azure Service Bus queue in order to store your messages. All right, so now this is the queue for storing the sales message, as I already mentioned, and we created that already. Another thing that I would like to make mention is the fact that once that you have this queue, so let's go inside of this sales message queue, there's something that is very important here, which we are going to use later. All right, so one thing that is very important is not actually one, is two, is the point that we need a endpoint service bus, and this is something that we can find here. So this one. So basically, I'm going to copy this and put it in my notepad, and that is what I'm going to use as my uh, endpoints for the service bus. Okay, and also another thing is the fact that we are going to use the uh, access key, and the service bus basically restrict access to queues or topics by requiring a valid access key, and we need to get this access key from the namespace level, and which means that we need to go out of the messages queue into the queue topic. In order to do that, what I'm going to do is to maybe just go back one step into the home page, and here we can see all the resources that we've created. So I want to go into the service bus namespace, so I'm going to click on the queue topic, and from the queue topic, I'm going to have an access to the share access policy, and I'll click on that. So as a matter of fact, it's loading. So let's click one more time. So here we can see that something is coming up. And once we have that come up, then we have the policy, so which has the root manage share access, and this is the uh, root access for the queues. And if in future you added a topic to the service bus, this also is going to be the root access for the topic. So now I'm going to take that, click on it, and here we can see we have what we call manage, and this key should be private to you actually. So I'm going to take the primary connection string, I'll copy that, and I also put it in a safe place because I'm going to use it throughout this tutorial. Okay, so now once we are done with that, then we are good to go, right? So I'm going to close that, and again that should be private key, and that should be accessible only to you. Both of those informations that we copy are something that we can see that we need to provide to the service bus client object in the form of a connection string by the time we started writing our code. And now what I'm going to do is to continue on how we are going to actually connect and connect to the service bus and add messages into the queue, and also to be able to receive messages from the queue. So as I mentioned, the endpoint for your namespace and the share access key for authentication. So those two are something that you need to get. I'm going to jump into writing the code right now. So now what we are going to do is to write the code that will send the messages into the queue and also the one that will retrieve the messages from the queue. So as you can see here, I have a folder which I call the start folder. And within that folder, I have two other folders. So the first one is the private message receiver, and the second one is the private message sender. So for us to be able to receive any message, we have to actually send those messages into the queue, right? So which means that we are going to start working on the private message sender first. So I'm going to click on the program CS file, and right here you can see that there's already work in progress. So here we have the sales messages, which is going to be the sales messages queue that we created in the cloud. Okay. And the next thing I want to do basically is to take a look at the main function that we can see here. So here we can see that the main function is calling send sales message async dot get awaiter dot get result. Okay, so basically we are going to be calling this function that we can see here in order to send the message. And for us to be able to send a message, we can see we have some comments here. So the first thing we want to do is to create a service bus client. And how do we create a service bus client? In order to create a service bus client, we will create a variable var right here, and we will call this client. Okay, and we are going to use a new service bus client object, and then we are going to pass in the connection string. So let's say new, and right here we have service bus clients. So here you can see I have an option for that, and the reason for that option is because I already have this Azure.messaging.service bus right there. Okay, so now here we can see that we have the service bus clients, and I want to pass in the connection string. So here we can see my connection string right there. And in order to pass in the connection string, so we have to make sure that we supply something into the connection string. Okay, so now you remember the connection strings that we actually copied the other time. So that's what we have to pass into that particular place. So permit me to take that from my notepad and put it right there. So right here, I'll put it right here. So that's my service bus connection string. Okay. And the next thing I want to do is to make sure that I pass in the connection string right here. So at that place into here, into the service bus clients. All right. So now the next thing we want to do is to create the sender here. And one more thing, I will use the await using and right here in order to dispose to call the disposer automatically. And now the next thing I want to do is to make sure that I have the sender, and we need to create the sender right here. So which means that again I will do await and using, and let's call this the service bus. So here we have service bus clients. So the one I'm looking for now should be service bus sender. Okay, so of course we can type that. I'm just kind of scrolling down for you to see as many as possible what we have here. So let's type service bus and we need sender. So right here we go. We take that and we're gonna call this sender object, and we're gonna say client. So that's the client that we already created here. So that client, we call the client instance clients, and we call dot, and from there we should have create sender right here. Okay, and we open and close, and we want to be able to uh, create our sender and pass in the queue name. Okay, so right here I will pass in the queue name, which is this queue name. Okay, all right. So once we are done with that, then we want to try create and send a message within this try block that we can see here. So now what I'm going to do is to come under here, and I need to create the message that I would like to send into the queue. So let's call it the message body. Okay, so we have the message body and what we actually want to send into the queue. So let's do a string formatting here, and let's say 20 let's say $20,000. So let's say something like this. It's going to be the message body. And now, the next thing we have to look into basically is to create the message itself. And how do we do that? So I'll come down, I'll create a variable and I'll call it message. And then we have to have the new, and we need to call the service bus message, right? So service bus message. So right here we go. I'll take that and open and close. And right here we are going to pass in the message body. So that's going to serve as a message. Okay. So now that we have the message, so we want to be able to send this message. So I will do, before we send, let's try to log something into console. So I'll do console.writeLine. Console.writeLine, and we have dollar, and let's have the double quote right there. And now we sending something. So let's put a message here, sending a message. And what message are we sending? So let's try to pass in the message that we are sending inside here. And the message we are sending is going to be message body. Okay. So we want to see that written into the console. And then uh, we want to make sure that we actually send this message. So await, and let's do the sender and dot. So the sender that we actually created right here is what we are going to use now to send the message. So we're going to call this send message async, so which is going to be sending the message. So as we can see, we pass in the message into that, and we can also come down to close the connection to the sender here. And how do we close the connection to the sender? So basically, I'm going to open and close this curly braces, and I want to call the dispose async, which is what we are actually doing here automatically. So I want to also do the same right here. So I will use the await here, await, and here we have the sender dot, and right here we need the dispose async, and which is of course going to close the sender connection once we are done. And also we want to close the connection for the client. So I'll do client dot dispose async. And that's it. So basically we are done now, and we can test our application to send messages into the queue. So now, in order for us to actually send message into the queue, what I'm going to do first, let's save this file. Control S on uh, my keyboard. That will save the file. And now what I'm going to do next is to make sure that I run this program. And I would like to use the uh, command line developer PowerShell. So you can see that from tools, command line, developer PowerShell. Then I'm going to click on that. Then the PowerShell should basically come up right here. So we can see the PowerShell is loading. And once that is done, then we are going to run this program using the PowerShell. All right. So now we are done. And in order to run this program, we need to be located in the folder where we actually have the program.cs, and which means that I need to cd to those folder from here. So we are in here, and I need to go to src, and from the src I need to go to start. So you can see, so right here we have the start, and from the start we have the private message sender and the private message receiver. So which means I can do .NET and run. And right here we have to run the project and dot. So we have the private, which is the project name, message, and sender, right? So we call that private message sender. So if the name is correct and everything we have here is fine, then we should be able to actually run this service. And another thing you have to be sure of is the fact that you have to make sure that the sales messages is the same name that you have created in the Azure. Of facts. So one sec, I'll just refresh just to be sure that I'm using the queue name, correct queue name. Because if the queue name is not correct, then basically you that's will fail by the time we run it. All right, so as I can see here, this is the message name. So just for confirmation, we can of course copy this. Okay, so right here, just to make sure that you have the same thing. So that's the queue name, and we can put it right here just for confirmation. Okay, and the connection string is what you already copy, and that should be fine. Queue topic and so on. So now what I'm going to do, as I mentioned previously, is to run the code. And now, so I'm going to hit enter on the keyboard, and let's see the message that will pop up from here. So here is basically running at the moment, and we're going to wait and see what happens. Okay, I see something is hanging up, and let's take a look at what we did. Right here, I can see that basically we are missing the finally, so I'm gonna just pull that. So after the cache, try cache finally, then we missed that. So right now we have it. So what I'm going to do is to save, and basically right there, and hit enter. So if everything is fine, then we should be able to see something being sent. So all hand on deck, and we're gonna see what happened in a few minutes. So here we can see that something fails and we need to fix the build error and run again. So let's take a look at why it's failing basically. Okay, so you might have noticed that the build is actually failing, and I just realized now that I forgot to close this. If you also missed that, please go back and just pull that, and that should be fine. And the next thing I will just do one more time is go to tools, and I'm going to select my command line. So let's use this developer PowerShell. If you're on Visual Studio Code, you can do that from the terminal, which is also fine. But right here, I will just go back to the SRC, and we need to get into the stats. And from here, all we want to do is to make sure that we have this .NET uh, run projects and private message sender. So that's the one we are calling at the moment. And let's hit enter and see what happens. Yeah, of course, we have to make sure that we save the file. So don't forget to do that. And let's see what happens now. So good. Here we can see that sending a message to the sales message queue, sending message. So this is the message that we sent, and we can see that message was sent successfully. So all well and good. So here we can see that everything seems to be working. And sorry guys for the omission that we actually made there. So now we can see that everything works. We are able to send to the queue, and we are good to go. So now that we have message in the queue, probably we can go to the cloud and maybe check for the message that we just sent. So right here, it's my cloud environment, and we can take a look and see if we can find anything right here and right here. So let's just refresh. So let's refresh and see if we can find any messages right here. As a matter of fact, we can see that we have one message active. So that's the message that we just sent. Okay. So if I go back and I try to run this program one more time, then that should also send another message, and we should have two messages. So let's see what happens. So we are sending again another message into the queue. And as a matter of fact, we know that queue is something that we call first in, first out. So if we check again by refreshing, so let's see what we can see right here. So right here, we can see that we have two messages. So which is fine. So two active messages already came into the queue. And these two active messages are something that we have to at least disperse, right? So we have to be able to receive them. And in order to do that, we have to also write the function that will do that job in the private receiver uh, program. So here we can see these are the things that we have to do here. So we have to follow all these steps in order to actually receive a message. So the first one, of course, is to create a service bus client that we authenticate using a connection string. And in order to do that, we just come under and we say var clients. And here we have new, and we have service bus and clients. And right here we have the service bus connection. So which of course we have to pass in this service bus connection right there. So that goes in here. So again, you have to make sure that you copy the endpoints that you put in the notepad and place it here. So the same one we used previously. And once we are done with that, then we want to make sure that we have the creative options to use for configuring the processor. In order to do that, we have to configure that option, and we just call var, and I'm going to call this processor option. Okay, so we have processor options, and that will be equals to we doing assignment right there, and we have service, and we're gonna call this service bus processor. So let's type and see if we can find it quickly. Service bus right here, processor. So right there we go, option. That's the one we need. And in this option, we want to create the mass concurrent course, and we're gonna set that to 1. Okay, and also that will be comma right there. And also we want to have the autocomplete messages, we want to set that to basically false. Okay, and after that I'll come down. Then we need to create a processor that we can use to process the messages, and in order to do that I will come down under these comments, and I'm going to use the await, and I'm going to say using, and here we have the service bus processor, and processor right there, and we have the processor, so as the object name, and we're gonna do clients right here, so that's the client that we created down there. So we're gonna say dot, and we create the processor using the client, and in here we want to make sure that we pass in the queue and the processor option at least. So let's say the queue name. So after the queue name, we want to have the processor option. As we can see, it's already being suggested. So uh, let's just say processor options right there. Okay. So with that, we we are not done yet. So the next thing we want to do is to make sure that we configure the message and error handler to use. So how do we do that? So I'll come down right here, and I will just say processor, and here we have dot, then we have the process message async, so that's what we want to use, and plus equal, and here I'm going to call the message handler, so which is going to handle my message by retrieving those messages, right? So we call message handler right there, and the next thing is to also do the same uh, for processing the error in case there's an error. So processor dot, so I'm going to call process error, as we can see, async. So that, and here we have plus equals to error handler. So I'll take that. Okay, and now we can see that we need to start processing, so that will be the next thing we do, and I'll just use await right there, and I will do processor, then I will do dot start processing async. Okay, so that will be start processing, and consider read, and here we can close the processor down here, and in order to do that I will do await again, and I'll do processor and stop processing async. No, I will use close async for that. So let's say close async, and that's it. So now we have uh, the receiver program set up, and here already we can see that the message handler is already being set up, and the error handler is already being set up, and this is what we are using right here. Okay, so now that we already added 2 messages into the queue, and we need to retrieve those messages from the queue. And what we are going to do is to make sure that we actually run the program in order to receive those messages. So I'll go back to here, and right now we are going to use this, but in this case it's not going to be the sender, but it's going to be the receiver that we want to call. So we want to receive the message that we actually sending, and we need to make sure that the name is actually correct. So private message receiver, and that should be what we have here. Private message receiver. Okay, and now I will let's save this file first before we run that program. And now I'll just hit enter on the keyboard, and we're gonna wait and see to get the message that we are actually looking for. Okay, so here we can see we have an error, and there's a reason for that. So let's take a look. Expected. So error we have received. Okay, maybe we need to expand to see clearly. We can see, okay, we missed that. Okay, so let's take a look quickly at where that is missing, and we can fix it. So one is here, so I'll pull that. And I think Visual Studio 2020 is not notifying whenever this is missing. So this, of course, is something that VS Code is always going to show you. But then let's take a look at everything we have. I think we we cover that, and also here we missed that. So where else do we miss it? So I think that's it. So every other places we had it. So now let's just do the run one more time, and receiver. Okay, we actually didn't save the file, so I'll just save it, Control S, and let's go back and see what is going to happen here. So we are waiting, and let's see what happens actually. And if everything is fine, then we should be able to see that it seems that something is coming up. So here we can see press enter key to exit, and we receive all the message from the queue. That's great, guys. This is how you can actually send messages to queue and receive messages to queue. I hope you actually enjoy this tutorial, and if you do, kindly subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and hit the notification bell. Thank you. See you next time.